This is an awesome responsibility, and I'm going to try to do my best. Paulus was an original. He brought a new perspective to ceramics, the field of craft, and the wider world. The people he touched, he really touched. And if you've never met anybody who sort of was touched by Paulus, they really speak of it in a very special way. He was a dancer, potter, writer, teacher, and deep ecologist. He brought a new awareness into our studios. His ruminations on His ruminations on science, myth, language, the earth, and our bodies. Many will remember his recitations of poems which he delivered in his inimitable grand way. Magnificent posture, sweeping gesture, dramatic pause, repeating a line or two for emphasis, always leaving his audience spellbound. As a boy, Paulus longed to dance, but he was discouraged by his mother, Edith. And I'm going to let Paulus tell this.
I was bitten by a story as I entered this world. I said to my mother, I want to be a dancer. And she said, boys in my family don't dance. And Anna said, but Edith, to dance is to spring from the hand of God.
That permission-granting sentence, to dance is to spring from the hand of God, with its leaping image of divine creation, contained the themes that would guide Paulus over his lifetime, from dancer to potter to thinker to journal maker to encourager of all artists and lover of all arts. Paulus attended many institutions, Goddard College for a year. He bounced in and out of various higher learning colleges, Columbia, Bennington, Juilliard, all come up, though he never earned a degree, until he immersed himself in the New York dance scene, working with Martha Graham and Merce Cunningham. During one performance, he experienced an epiphany, which he describes again. And these clips I'm taking are from a film that Neil Lawrence made in 2013. So here's his description of his auditory hallucination.
I was dancing in a Broadway show, and I heard a voice from the other side of the stage say, well, Paulus, this is dancing on a stage, but what does it mean to dance in life?
Well, the answer to this question, what does it mean to dance in life, emerged 2 weeks later when Paulus traveled to Gate Hill Cooperative Community just outside of New York City and saw Karen Carnes throwing a pot. As he told me in a 2007 interview for the Smithsonian Archives of American Art, I stood there and watched Karen from the back, sitting at her old Italian kick wheel, where the wheel head was on her left. The first thing I saw her do was pull up a cylinder of clay and at the same time lengthen her spine. And when Paulus tells this story, he's lengthening his spine. And then, and this is what got to me, she reached for her sponge in the slip bucket, picking up the sponge without taking her eyes off the cylinder, and squeezed some slip onto her work. The gesture of the sightless reaching her hand made was elegant and inevitable. I thought, that's a dance to learn. Another answer to the question arrived in the form of MC Richards, who he met that day at Gate Hill as well. He followed MC to Haystack School, where she was teaching that summer, which began their lifelong and intimate friendship. MC advocated a deprofessionalized studio practice. Working with clay was foremost a spiritual path of self-discovery, and she liked to quote C.K. Chesterton, who said, anything that's worth doing is worth doing badly. Paulus was earning a living at making pots too, selling his pots and teaching at places like Swarthmore College. In 1965, he purchased a farm in northeastern Pennsylvania that he went on to share with MC and others as a creative community. That's the creative community. Several years later, the farm was a site of the Summer Kiln Building Festival led by British potter educator Anne Stannard, who after this meeting would become Karen Carnes' lifelong partner. The majority of attendees were women, which was atypical in what was at the time a male-dominated aspect of the field, and we hope that's changing. I don't know. What do you think? Are we getting somewhere? Maybe, maybe not. Soon after, Cynthia Bringle, who'd also been in MC's Haystack class and Anne's Kiln workshop, invited Paulus to come to Penland School in North Carolina to teach a workshop. That community became his base for nearly 5 decades until his death last year. At Penland, he began teaching workshops as he developed his pinch potting technique, at the time generally thought of as a prelude to the real work of throwing on the wheel. This led to the writing of his classic bestseller, Finding One's Way with Clay. This book has never been out of print, and it contained sort of how-to constructions for making simple pinched pots, as well as thoughts on the environment, spirituality, and the universality of creativity. And it's really interesting because as I was doing this and saying that I was going to memorialize Paulus, several people got in touch with me and said, that book is really one of the most important books that I own, and they still refer to it. So it's kind of it's a really good book to look at even now. As his workshop teaching took him increasingly further afield, he became less interested in firing his pinched pots, letting them return to the earth as they disintegrated outside in natural settings. Paulus became the unofficial poet laureate of Penland, reciting his poems at the convenings of workshop sessions and visiting classes to share his insights into unrecognized human senses. He claimed there were 62. Words within words, and the power of craft to restore the balance between humans and the earth. Call this his effluviating period, to use his own invented word, which means, to quote Paulus, to exaggerate, to fluff up, to embroider upon something I experience as wonderful. I use it when I want to encourage the sense of awe. And I was thinking of Paulus in the last part of his life. He had several strokes, but he refused to say that he had a stroke. He said, I was stroked. The final shift in Paulus's creative output. Where are we? Let's see. Yes. The final shift in Paulus's creative output began when Paulus discovered the art of journal making, which he taught to many students in workshops at Penland and around the world. His approach to journals, with their freely painted covers, sewn Coptic bindings, and daily doodles and thoughts, became the impetus for workshops for urban teens that Penland ran for several summers, and a program that Penland has run continuously in the local elementary schools. It is currently fashionable to frame one's artistic practice as interrupting or subverting, often from those who are embedded in some of the most prestigious institutions of art and culture in our country. Here, Paulus was way ahead of his time. In fact, he was a barefoot walking and talking critique of the hubris of anthropocentrism, blind ambition, the worship of technology, and the destruction of the planet. He advocated instead a gentle, mindful attentiveness to the body, to natural materials, and to nature. Paulus was indeed a living intervention. So I'm just going to click through some slides of Paulus in the later part of his life around Penland. And these are some of Paulus's journal works. And we'll just kind of keep moving here. A beautiful page from his journal and a drawing. For a guy who was so deeply skeptical of accolades, Paulus garnered a few big ones. Honorary Fellow of the American Craft Council, honorary member of this organization, recipient of the Distinguished Educators Award from the James Renwick Alliance, and as we saw a 2013 film of his life and work, To Spring from the Hand, the work of Paulus Behrensohn by Neil Lawrence. Writing of the film, our poet laureate of the natural world, Marriott Oliver, said, Paulus Behrensohn, whether he's speaking slowly and thoughtfully as he does, or just smiling, is a gift. With his presence, life takes on a new radiance and energy. He teaches, he shines. I'll conclude with a couple of images of Paulus's funeral and memorial at Penland last summer. This beautiful structure was made by one of Paulus's so-called fairy godchildren, Jonas Stanford, built on the knoll at Penland. Paulus kind of loved children and collected them and stayed in touch with them over their lifetimes and kind of mentored them, and he called these children his fairy godchildren. And this is his green funeral procession at Penland. It gives a sense, near the end, Paulus cut off his ponytail and dyed his hair blue to express the wildness of it all. a kind of Thoreau-like gesture, which give a sense of, just gives us, and these images just give a sense of how cherished, quirky, and completely original Paulus was in life and in death.